Now, it wasn't the first time, and it certainly wouldn't be the last, that Chris would leave my office and I would be furious. And really all I wanted to say was, why can't you just follow the program? Why do you have to be so damn difficult? But I didn't. I sat there and I listened. And in retrospect, I'm really glad that that's how I reacted to that situation, because it led me to the idea that brings me here today. And it's this idea of vulnerability's role in leadership, and specifically when you're dealing with disruptive talent. Now, I've come to believe that it's this combination that really can change organizations and drive innovations with great speed. Now, the day before our conversation, our company had rolled out a major initiative. This major initiative was seen by most of leadership, including myself, as a breakthrough idea that was going to help productivity across the board. So imagine my surprise when literally 24 hours after this rollout, Chris shows up to my office to express serious concerns about this initiative. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Chris first. Now, I've always tried to surround myself with individuals who really don't care about my title or, frankly, anybody else's. They're not really about BSing the boss. Now, I've come to believe and come to think of these individuals as what I call the productive malcontent. They're productive because they are highly intelligent, they are highly energized, they work very hard, and they're incredibly creative. They're malcontents because they're brutally honest, they like to play outside the rules, they have a penchant for experimentation, and most of all, and I think this is what I really like about them, is they're very rebellious. Now, most leaders, I think, would think of these individuals as simply as troublemakers. But I'm telling you, they're much more than that because of their ability to find creative solutions to very complicated problems. Indirectly, they force an organization to remain honest and truthful about who they really are. On the flip side, they are a pain in the ass. And let me tell you, Chris fit the bill on every single level. So there she was, my productive malcontent, in my office to let me know that this wasn't going to work. So she did. Did we really think about the sustainment methods as much as we should have? Were we really measuring the right things to make sure that this was going to be as effective as we thought it was going to be? Did we think about the workload that this was going to create for the individuals closest to this work? And finally, my personal favorite, where was my leadership before this rollout to make sure that this didn't actually see the light of day? You can imagine how that made me feel. But I just sat there and I listened. I asked questions to clarify her points, but I just really wanted to understand. Essentially what I did was, as I opened myself up and became vulnerable to her criticism, I came open to the idea that, well, maybe we had made a mistake. I was open to the idea that, well, if we had made a mistake, what could we possibly do in order to get this problem fixed? So after she left my office, it took me several hours to calm down. But once I did, I had to ask myself the tough question. Had we moved too fast? Was this not as well thought out as we thought it was? And you know what? I had to be honest with myself. The answer was yes, she was right. So I brought her back in, brought the team back in, and we had to solve these issues, and we did. It became a very successful rollout. It became very productive in the way that we had intended. But without her willingness to be honest, combined with my willingness to listen and open and be vulnerable to her criticism, we would have ended up spending valuable resources for an inordinate amount of time and would not have been effective. Now, this idea of vulnerability in leadership, I think, is a critical one. And it's important because I think that it gives promise to solving two major organizational issues that each organization faces today. The first one is how do you retain high talented people? And the second is how do you innovate at the speed to stay ahead of your competition? Now, with that said, vulnerability in leadership is not widely understood. And it's not widely understood because there's really only a handful of articles out there that are all based on Brené Brown's work. There's her TEDx talk. There's a subsequent book that she wrote that has a chapter about vulnerability in leadership, but that's really it. But what's clear is this. It is essentially a leader's willingness to be vulnerable to criticism. It's a leader's ability to recognize when things are off track. It's the willingness to say, I don't know. I need your help. We may have made a mistake. It's the ability to listen and understand and ask probing questions, and specifically when that leader is on the other side of the issue. Now, this is exactly what happened between Chris and I that day. And when you think about what attributes an innovative leader has, and a leader specifically that fosters innovative teams, you can see they have the hallmark of vulnerable leadership. They share power appropriately. They openly share information. They have a highly adaptable approach and style, and they deal well with productive conflict. Now, when you think about the effectiveness of these leaders, it really is about building these environments within organizations that allow individuals to continue to grow and foster their talent, which in turns creates a position where you are able to continue to innovate and keep up. On an individual level, what it looks like is these leaders' ability to connect deeply with the people that they work with. And as we know from Brené Brown's work, deep connectivity is achieved through vulnerability. Now, it's ultimately these two individuals, though, that create the combination that you need to continue to innovate with great speed. The productive malcontent independently without the right leadership is most often called into question. They're called a miscreant, if you will, right? They're miscast, and sometimes even completely disregarded. The vulnerable leader without the productive malcontent, while really great to work for, and they foster people, they don't necessarily innovate with the same speed as that creative, productive malcontent. So I'll leave you with this. I have a lot of stories like the one that I shared with you, where I fought hard not to fight the person that was in my office that day. And when I'm up to the challenge, and let me tell you, it is a challenge, my productive malcontents thrive, which means my teams become more creative. And when my teams become more creative, we get to share a sense of purpose together. So to the leaders out there, I ask you to do 3 things in order to live into vulnerable leadership. The first is this: fight the urge to fight and listen. The second, use questions to gain understanding and clarity, and specifically in those circumstances where you don't agree with the person that you're sort of having a dialogue with. And the third, which I think is the most important, but the most difficult, is embrace and surround yourself with the productive malcontent, because they can be the catalyst and engine for change and innovation in your organization. Now, I believe that if we can embrace and live into vulnerable leadership, each of us can change our organizations one vulnerable moment at a time. Thank you.